All right. Well, great to see you guys. Um, I'm honored to be here. Just to introduce myself, my name's Jake Rugh. Sounds like Jake Rugh, so if you can't remember. And I am seventh generation, either born or raised here in Provo. Um, did not grow up here. I grew up in Chicago, in Hyde Park and Woodlawn. Yep, same neighborhood as Harold Washington, Barack Obama, Louis Farrakhan, and many other people. So I'm really excited to be in Utah and to see the changes that are happening. And I want to just thank, first of all, beyond all of our chairs and leaders and secretaries, I want to thank the people that are bravely running for office. I know there's multiple of you right here. I see you. And I want to thank all the people who came out on such a beautiful day to be here. I can promise I'm going to make it worth your time. And for those who've seen my other presentations, I have new stuff today. All right, so is it down or up to go forward? We'll find out here. Yeah, it's down. I remember these ones. Okay, awesome. All right, so here's what I want to talk about today. And can you guys see this okay with the lighting? Is it good? Okay, if it's too small in the back, there's room up here in the front. So what sets Utah apart? We'll talk about that first, our purple state potential. And I'm going to go over some highlights from the 2025 elections. You see some of the people that were winners here on a citywide basis. Then I'm going to go into the big blue shift. The last 20 years, Utah has swung more blue than any state. We did trail Washington State by 0.1 points. So we are right there in the silver medal position right behind you in the last 4 years. And I will show you county level evidence. I'm going to talk about the Hispanic vote and the reason to hope and to get very excited. And then I'm going to talk about what you want to stay for, the big blue wave that's building for 2026. Okay, I've got just 4 slides at the end, but it's my favorite part, so I can't wait to get there. Okay. All right, so what sets Utah apart? I'm not going to read all of these, but I'm going to emphasize that Utah is a very urban state. It's going to have the Olympics twice. Only LA and California can say that. And we have a very independent judiciary, right? The judges and the state Supreme Court that are very well respected, that have a very tried and true selection method. And we have seen the fruits of, right, having checks and balances in this state. And we thank all of those who tirelessly worked on this lawsuit to bring us fair maps. And at the top, I mean, I want to remind you, we're going to get a 5th seat in 2032. So we're not stopping with just 1 blue seat. We want to shoot for 2, right? We want to shoot for at least 2. Absolutely. Well, let's shoot for 5. I'm with you. Let's do it. I'll be there with you. I'll go knock doors for that. Utah is the least evangelical state. You can see it here among the red states, but we're the least evangelical of all states. The state population, there's lots of different estimates, is around 50% LDS, right? We know that the stereotype outside of Utah is that it's somewhere like the legislature, it's 80, 90%, but it's not. It's around 50%. It is the second most immigrant welcoming state. We had many policies that were in jeopardy last legislative session. We did lose one of those policies, but we are a welcoming state. And I can tell you the young people that I teach at BYU that are dreamers and the children of immigrants, they recognize this and are really grateful for the leadership of Utah Democrats at the state level. Like I said, Utah swung blue more than any other state last 20 years. It's not even close, even the last 12 years as well. And we have the largest penalty excuse me, let's see, I'm going the wrong way here. The largest penalty in terms of our House members, those that are MAGA, suffer a big penalty. And we had the biggest penalty, the president compared to the Senate. We had the second smallest Republican shift, and we had a very small turnout differential. Yeah, I'm going to show you that in the next slide. So what that means is you can look at those like John Curtis before he was in office, right, was seen as being more moderate. And so he won by 7.5. And then you can see the House members, they didn't win by as much, and then Trump won by even less. So when you split that out, you say if you have MAGA House members, they had districts that are already more red, and they underperformed, right, already by a few points, and then Trump underperformed them, right? So there's a penalty both for Trump, but also for being for Trump, right? And Kennedy and Owens and others suffered this penalty. What's remarkable about the Wasatch Front, and this is, I've looked at all the other metro areas, over 80% of the suburbs in this last election that was so difficult swung blue, right? Over 80% of those suburban areas swung blue. This is not seen anywhere else. We just talked about Seattle that's elected a great new mayor, Pittsburgh, Atlanta. Those three metros all were about 1 point off, right? They moved 1 point to the right, and the Wasatch Front didn't move right at all. That was really remarkable in the type of election that we had. And when you look at the last 20 years, it's only Atlanta, Georgia, and the Wasatch Front. Those have moved to the left by far more than any other place. And this just shows you some of the counties, and it shows you all the way up to Cache County. I know we got some people came all the way down. I appreciate you guys being here. Within the state of Utah, Davis and Utah counties have swung the left the most, 36 points, right? So that's incredibly remarkable. You can see it's right on par with these counties around Atlanta that nationally are known for just swinging and keep swinging left, and they just keep going. Another thing about our state is that we have a lot of our neighbors and friends who are, as an academic would say, cross-pressured, that they are conflicted. They're moderate Republicans. They're our neighbors. They're good people, and the women in particular have organized at a very high rate, right? And when they went out in the caucuses among the Republicans, right, you saw why they didn't have a primary, right? Because Donald Trump would have lost a primary, and that would have been very embarrassing. But having said all that, Nikki Haley did better than any other state, like by far, right? Especially that had over 1 million people, and Utah is 3.5. And you look at a county like Utah County, Trump only won it by 5 points and lost the city of Provo, and Nikki Haley beat Trump in Mike Lee's precinct, right? We have that verified and confirmed, okay? So there are people of goodwill, people that can be an alliance with us, and people that we eventually want to say, become a Democrat, run as a Democrat. And you think that hasn't happened. That's happened in Kansas City and all over the country. People who said, you know what, I'm done, right? So when that time comes, I know they're going to be in this cafeteria with us. Okay. This is kind of my overarching idea, is that in Utah, we have well over a third, sometimes more, voting Democratic. You saw Kamala Harris get the highest Democratic vote share since Lyndon B. Johnson in the 1960s at 38%. We have a big quarter in the middle that tell pollsters, I'm not MAGA. They vote against MAGA. Some of them sometimes do. That's the people in the middle that we need, right? When you look at that 40%, and I think in this poll at 43, that was our high watermark, they are a plurality and they're a majority of the Republican side. And so we know what happens is more and more of the same Republicans keep going down. That's going to keep happening. It happens at the national level. It's going to keep happening in this blue wave. And, right, the rules of the game determine, what happens. Like my professor said, if basketball was 100 feet long and, the hoops are 30 feet high, right, you'd have different types of players winning. So we have to figure out how to make those coalitions happen. And people all across the state and all types of counties and cities are figuring this out. And it's rather remarkable. Which brings me to 2025. We're going to start at the top. I put these in order. Shout out to Ogden. I don't know if anybody came down here from Ogden or Weaver County. Yeah, there we go. Ogden table. That's great. My grandfather was a professor at Weaver State back in the day. You can see Ogden had a clean sweep, right? All three progressive candidates won. You can see here convincing fashion in this map. But all the way down where different groups coordinated, targeted resources, contested races, right? We won 70% across the board. Some of these in the purple were people that were nonpartisan or non-MAGA, and you can see Democrats really held their own, 86% holding the seats, right? And this doesn't even include Salt Lake City and all the stuff, the other places where we cleaned up. This is just the stuff that was highly contested. We did really, really well. And these are some of the people that won. Just want to give a shout out to Annette Harris, former student of mine, and so proud of her, and so many others all across the state who won, and bringing that representation to the community. Here in Provo, we had a principal Republican who quit the legislature to protest really the corruption that was happening, run for mayor against a mayor and a campaign manager that engaged in many very unethical, dirty politics that ended up backfiring. that ended up backfiring. And that was spectacular. And the reason why this matters is just to show is like, let's just pick a place that's stereotypically Republican, right? We all know from 2004, it was the most conservative city. What a difference 21 years made, right? You look at the last 4 races, and you can see that most of the city is not consistently voting Republican, right, in Provo. They're not voting for the Republican nominee. And once people stop voting for the Republican nominee so many times in a row, you know what happens? It gets easier and easier for them to vote for Democrats, right? So we have to have a foundation. We've got to start somewhere. These are our blue precincts in this county, right? We have got to start somewhere, and we will build on this, right? And so what you see is just that coalition idea that we really only have 30, 40, 50% right here who are always going to be MAGA. So we actually do have a competitive landscape, and we may have, I don't know how confirmed this is, may have a retirement in the most purple competitive House District 60 here in Utah County that only voted for Trump over Biden by 10 points, right? They have a great opportunity right now, if Representative Clancy retires, to replace that with a really good Democrat, right? Or even independent. So I mean, like, we're going to be able to test this like quick, like, you know, next cycle. Absolutely. We can do this. And I'll tell you later on, but in case I forget, my neighborhood has swung 54 points just in the dozen years that I've lived here. 54 points left, okay? So that's that type of coalition. In the mayor race, where you can see the majority of her coalition were not Republicans, and people came together, including younger voters, whereas the defeated incumbent, who lost for a lot of reasons besides serving 8 years and lots of other reasons, tried to just stack the deck with 80% Republicans, get them all to vote early, but ended up losing in a very consequential race for the leadership. So if you look at these youngest age categories, 50% of young people are now unaffiliated or Democratic in Utah County, and these younger voters are the majority of the voters in our party and our voter file in Utah County. They're 53%. And in 10 years, right, when they're 18 to 45, they'll be 60%. They're going to be a big percentage, and this is the future. The big problem is when you look, the big challenge, I should say, the challenge to be overcome is that the places that vote the most blue have the lowest turnout. And this is not a new problem. This is true in lots of cities in America, but that's something that we need to overcome here in Provo. You can really see that overlap. And even in a close race like the mayor's race, with so many young people being engaged, I would add, by other young people that were managers and really adept at this, they turned out at a higher rate. So that's just a microcosm, just a representation of an issue that you probably have in your city. And I know that there are younger people that are very effective at getting other young people to vote. But I will say that 38, 39%, I think, is a record turnout for a municipal election. So we clearly have people who went to a protest, and they actually did follow up and voted as well, right? And I don't know how many people you've met at a protest who don't vote. You're like, wait a minute, you spent all this time at the protest, your sign is beautiful. Like, come out and vote too, we need you, right? We absolutely need you. All right, let's talk about 2024 again, right? It was a devastating evening. I went to bed early. We were extremely disappointed. It was very hard to find slivers of hope that night. We know that in America, we have the lowest crime rate on record. We have the lowest murder rate ever recorded. Chicago, my city, had the safest summer since 1965. And at the same time, we have one slide. If I had to choose one slide to summarize the 2024 election, it would be this slide right here, right? The objective reality of the border being the most secure in the history of America, right? Border crossings being so low, crime being all-time low, stock market being all-time high, best inflation rate of all the right developed economies, immigrants giving us the strongest economy in the whole world, right? All of those true facts were lost on way too many voters, right? And that is beyond the scope of this presentation, and people are working on that problem. But this summarizes, right, so well. Now, as it becomes undeniable, right, when somebody's taking their child to school and being yanked out of their car by ICE, and these videos are going viral, and white parents in Chicago have Facebook groups to pick up the Hispanic children to protect their parents, right? That type of solidarity and visibility all day, all the time on people's phones is turning things in the opposite direction, right? Where people are realizing this is not what we voted for, okay? When you look at how Harris did relative to Biden, You can see the drop off. And I want to put over here some rectangles that show you the swing states. And when you look at these rectangles, you're like, wait a minute. Last I checked, Utah wasn't a swing state. It wasn't a battleground state. But look at all the battleground states. I mean, this should give people in this room a lot of hope and faith. Campaigning matters, right? Where the Harris campaign really campaigned best, and I would say that was Wisconsin, right? They hardly lost any ground. They lost just enough to barely lose, right? Wisconsin was the one with the smallest slippage in the swing states. But then you look at Utah, and you're like, what is going on with Utah, right? What happened? What happened there? So I'm going to come back to that, but I want to talk about Utah County, right? And again, every suburban city except for, I don't know what happened in Vineyard, but we'll do a research project on that another day. But everyone swung blue, right? Provo stayed frozen at R18, right? The most purple city. And what's interesting is that Provo is 19% Latino, just like the U.S. So the U.S. goes almost 5 points right, but Provo stays still. So clearly something's going on. And Harris did do better than Biden in Provo, just like in Utah, right? So look at this. There are 180 counties in the U.S. that cast over 200,000 votes, right? These are urban and suburban counties with a lot of votes. And out of 180 counties, only 5 swung left. 5, right? That is it. And when you look at the 5, you fit on one slide. Utah County swung the most left and cast the most votes, right? So that's like, again, remember from 6th grade, right? You had the number line, you got 4.5 as the positive number, you got 0, right? We got teachers in the house here. I better get this right. And you got minus 1.5, right? On the number line, the correct answer is what? 6, right? That's a 6-point difference from the nation, right? That's why it's a big deal when you look at that trend. So that really stands out. And we know that people are moving here, and in a county like Utah County that's just so heavily Republican historically, that's going to also move the needle. This is something I want to really impress upon your minds, especially those in leadership, right? Prior to 2020, we never hit escape velocity, right? We're always just getting so few votes as Democrats at the top of the ticket. We break through in 2020, and then we just blow by that in 2024. And our goal for 2028 is make 100,000 votes. If we can do 100,000, this is what will happen. Note, state chair, Utah County will begin to reduce the Republican margin, right? So they will no longer grow their margin in this county. It will start to reduce in absolute votes, right? Now, their percentage margin, we already cut that in half from 74 to 39. But once we get down lower, they're actually going to stop netting more votes in Utah County, right? And they're going to have to look somewhere else. I know they got Washington County, right? They got some other places. But this is we're going to start to reverse that. That's going to be epic. I mean, that's going to be since LBJ 1964 level, right? So that is something we're really going to shoot for. I'm going to emphasize at the end. So again, Wasatch Front stays still. These 4 counties have 75% of Utah's residents and voters, and you can see us going about 6 points different from the country. You know, we know that college attainment is this biggest predictor of these suburban places swinging left. There is nothing to suggest that that will stop, and there's nothing to suggest that that started in 2016. That was something that was getting going before that. So that process will keep on going. It will keep swinging the suburbs left. It will ebb and flow. And again, 81% of the suburbs, every city below that line voted more Democratic. We're in the city of Orem, right, voted 3 points more Democratic, right, in a big red year. It was a really big deal, right? And we know that this is something in Utah where a gender gap has opened up from 4 points 20 years ago to maybe 20 points or more. So we know that many of the women have been leading out, and I knocked a lot of doors and a lot of cycles, and I met a lot of husbands who said, I haven't voted yet, my wife did already. I'm catching up to her, right? But right? And they're more often those that are raising the next generation, okay? And we have women of all different backgrounds who are Democrats who've proven they can win. And these are just 2 out of so many. They both happen to be doctors, which is kind of fun. My kids telling me, they said, Dad, you're a doctor, but not the kind that helps people. I know, we're just playing, Dad. But these are 2 doctors that I admire so much. And Suzanne's parents live, our next door neighbors with my mom right here in Provo. So super excited about where they will go. Now let's talk about the Hispanic redshift. It was much smaller, much more of a pink shift in Utah. It was muted to none in many respects. Yeah, some of these cities did swing 3, 4, 5 points, right? That's not very much. I don't know if you've seen South Texas, Florida, Los Angeles, the Bronx, New York, right? But a lot of Hispanic areas, Massachusetts swung 20, 30 points or more. So not that much. Yeah.
Does the Hispanic shift have a gender split?
It does. Yep. There's one of the biggest gender divides among Hispanic voters. So the Hispanic men voted much more Republican compared to Hispanic women. And both groups, just for the record, did vote majority Democratic, right? They absolutely did. And so a lot of these cities, right, in Weber and Utah County and Salt Lake County, they're all about 20% Latino or more, and none of them moved right. So that's just a little bit of evidence showing you a difference. And when you look at all the precincts in the Wasatch Front, and you look at the ones that are more than 20% Hispanic, the whole right 2/3 of the graph, I see a lot of blue dots there, right? There are a lot of heavily Latino places that did not swing right in Utah, okay? So we had a different, this wave crashed differently on our shores in the state of Utah. This is from the Catalyst report. They go through so many demographics all across America, and it's supposed to be tiny so you can't see it on purpose. There's just so many categories. There's only 3 demographics that didn't shift right. We know that older black voters, what do they remember, right? They remember pre-civil rights America. We know that white women, right, who really got energized this cycle. And we also know that LDS voters were another group that did not shift right, which is amazing. Out of over 100, I mean, you cut the electorate into so many different categories. This is incredible. So in my data, I find that LDS vote moving left 2 points. Ryan Burge, who I cited earlier data, he says 0 points. Either way, it's the same story, right? It's either 6 to 8 points left of the U.S., right? I mean, it's just a huge outlier and a big puzzle to solve. And we have cities like Bountiful and Provo, right, that are probably some of the most anti-MAGA Republican cities in America. Right? You're seeing differentials in some of these neighborhoods up to 44 points, right? And people splitting their ticket and principally voting against MAGA and against Trump, right? So this LDS vote has become more democratic over time. We all remember that Romney ran in 2012, right? When that trend was interrupted, but it's continued to grow more democratic. And this is from the Oak Hills neighborhood of Provo, a really much more elderly couple, right, put this sign out, and they were not alone. There were a lot of pair signs in Provo this last cycle. So let's go back and let's widen this rectangle a little bit bigger, and let's like blow the minds of people who are not from Utah and say, did you know there's a lot of like even majority LDS counties outside of Utah? What? Right? There are a lot of heavily LDS counties in what's called the Mormon Corridor, right? The Mormon Corridor is a set of settlements that were about 50 miles apart because a horse can go 50 miles in one day to deliver a message, right? It goes all the way down through Utah, all the way down to Vegas, right, and all the way up in eastern Idaho, Star Valley, Wyoming. These places are heavily LDS, and you can tell by the vote swing and especially by the net trend when you compare how did they vote compared to the rest of America. It's obvious on a map, right, without a computer that there's a pattern here. There's a pattern. I know, I'm just as excited as you are about this. Right? And when you look at the population sizes, right, so that's where Phoenix is, Park City, Salt Lake City, and then Provo, where we are, right, it shows you that where Provo and Logan are, right, these places are more LDS, they're more suburban, and what, they're more college educated. And when you see those 3 things stack, you can see even in a big 2024 year, they went more blue. So what I did is I just did a regression analysis, which is a fancy way of controlling for all things at the same time. And I found that how LDS a county is the biggest predictor of its blue swing in the Mormon Corridor states, right? Of all these 5 states. I mean, that's very notable, and it really stands out. And it's robust to all these other stories, right? Like social capital, volunteering, and race, ethnicity, right? College education. It really, something's going on, right? Something's happened, and the only explanation I have, because we all went through the same inflation, is January 6th, and that LDS voters who are in the middle, and I know a lot who retired from the Republican Party, that was the last straw for some of them. Not for enough of them, but for enough to make a difference, right? So my argument to get to the last part is that the way that we've seen Utah County and Provo swing left, that just tells me we have a lot more room to go, right? The rest of the Utah electorate, the majority LDS electorate in places, they can swing just as left as well, right? And Provo can keep going too, right? I'm going to be around when we flip the city blue, right? We're going to do that. We're absolutely going to do it. We have a plan to do it, and it's going to take some time. Things weren't built one day, but by the time we have the Olympics, we're going to be really, really competitive in trying to flip it by the next decade for sure. Okay, so that's the summary, right, of what I talked about with 2024. Let's get into 2026, right? And I know a few faces that were here at the protest, and we have 4,500 here in Provo. I think one of the largest protests in Provo history. I can't wait to talk to a historian. I don't know if there's been a bigger one. But again, we just had the highest turnout in the city election, and we had the biggest protest, right? These things are correlated, right? There is a connection between the two of them. We know that in 2018, the special elections index was 11, and the country swung 10 points left. We know there's a growing divergence in who participates in specials, so expect that difference to be a little bit bigger. New Jersey and Virginia, I just quickly looked at the governor versus president, right? So that's a very top line. The Virginia House of Delegates, right? When you calculate that out, that was even a much, much bigger swing, right? So this understates it. I estimate we'll probably trail the index by maybe 2 points, maybe 3. So if this index is at 1314, which is literally off the charts of that chart right there, we're in the yellow territory, we're going to see a swing that's going to eclipse 2018. And 2018 was big in Utah, right? That's when we passed fair maps, okay? So if they put that thing on the ballot, I talked to a reporter about this yesterday, I actually think the timing is going to backfire on them. And I think the electorate that we get is going to preserve fair maps if it's put to a vote. Now, that's not going to happen. Yeah, it's not going to happen all on its own. It's going to happen because the people in this room, we're all going to register all our friends. We're going to make sure they all vote. We're going to be texting them the night before the election. We're like, remember last election, how bad it was? 2024, I will go with you to the polling place, right? And we will all spend all day, election day, helping people turn out to vote. When you look at our amazing people that won, I want to shout out to Jake Fitzamanu, public health expert and new representative in House District 30. You can see he really had a tremendous win and swing. And when you look at 2024 as well, the more I look at this, the better it is. You have 3 seats that swung left, 3 that swung right, and 4 that were pretty much the same, or they were never contested, right? So we don't have a baseline. That's pretty good, right, on an election night like 2024. And so when you apply a blue wave scenario, you can see here that we can flip back Rosemary's seat, right? We can flip back 26, 30, 39, and it won't be Jessica. She just won on city council. She already won, right? Patrick's going to run again up in Logan. And then also where we had a newcomer candidate do really well his first time running in House District 42. All of these seats and more, and there are people who have built some amazing spreadsheets. I've seen them. We're going to be able to do that. And I know it's been 3 cycles where every time the die has just tipped a little bit to the Republicans. All the close races have broken their way. And a statistician will tell you a hot hand in basketball or something, that doesn't last forever, right? We will win some of these close races, right? And I think with an 11-point wave, we can win at least 5 and flip at least 5 back. And we've got newcomers who run, scandals happen, things happen. File to run in races because you never know what's going to happen, right? We can absolutely do it. But we can't win a race if you don't file for it, right? You can't win a race if you don't have a candidate for it, right? We have to get there, and we will. So I am super excited about hitting 100K votes in 2028, flipping back those seats in 2026, and keeping this coalition together. And I thank you for this abbreviated presentation and your attention. Thank you.